Welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be talking about how to determine which side is winning in chess. I feel like this is an underrated skill because I've seen so many games, especially at lower elo ranges, where a perpetual check or draw by repetition is on the board, and then the side that is losing, if not for that draw opportunity for that repetition, continues to fight on and ends up losing the game. So I think knowing when you're winning is really important, and also like there are certain end games that are more likely to be drawn than others. Like rook pawn end games, a lot of the times, opposite colored bishop end games is a big one. So if you realize that you're losing, but you trade down to a opposite colored bishop end game, you're more likely to end up drawing the game. Whereas if you're winning, you don't want to trade down to an opposite colored bishop's end game. So we're going to talk about that. Let's get started. This PowerPoint. Um, okay, so the criteria of winning, the most important things is like obviously like taking pieces, tactics, checkmate attacks. We're gonna talk about like a little more depth and a little more like oh, there's no obvious tactics, in these positions or anything like that. Not a mate in one or anything. So king safety is huge. Um, it's the most important one. Obviously, like none of these positions we're gonna be looking at will have checkmate like instantly or anything like that. But if the king has a problem getting like forked or whatever, other pieces can fall. It can just be a target, or you have to dedicate resources to defending the king and other pieces fall. It's probably the most important in terms of like judging who's ahead. Piece activity is another really important one. Um, it is basically like how well can your pieces move across the board? Do they have a lot of mobility? Can they like take other pieces? Are they like in a position to be able to influence a lot of what's happening in the game? Material is like if there's a material imbalance, like a side has an extra knight or like an extra pawn, that's always a good indicator because if everything else gets traded down, the side with the extra pawn is most likely to win, or like an extra knight or something like that, that's huge. But that's less important than piece activity because if you're up a bishop, but your bishop is like just stuck and not doing anything, it might as well just not be there. So piece activity is more important than material, and oftentimes players will sacrifice material for a king attack and to get pieces opened up. So that's why king safety and piece activity, I would put them above material. And then the pawn structure is another big one. Um, the three main things are weak pawns, like isolated pawns, double pawns, pawns that are easy to just be under fire from enemy pieces. Weak squares, if your pawns are pushed too far forward, you might like they're called holes. You might like leave squares that aren't defended by pawns like in your own territory, and then enemy pieces, especially knights, can jump in there and start creating a bunch of havoc, and you're giving your opponent good piece activity with that. Another one is pass pawns. Pass pawns are super dangerous because then they become queens. Um, and and yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. Like pass pawns are more like long-term potential unless they're like super close to the edge of the board, but they're always really good. And it's also pass pawns are also a good source of counterplay too. Like if you know you're down, you know you're losing, but you have a pass pawn, you can try to use that pass pawn to your advantage to make your opponent like try to make a mistake, or you use that pass pawn to try to get yourself back in the game and get some counterplay. And lastly, I put this on there because it's worth noting. But who has the move? Like having the move is obviously like the most powerful thing in chess. But in these positions that I picked out, it's not like there's going to be an immediate like, oh, you could like take a piece and just instantly win the game kind of tactics. Yeah, I kind of wanted to make this like more long term who's winning. So let's look at this first example here. In this first example here, I'm playing white, and my opponent is very winning. I think Stockfish is being generous to me with this minus 2.4 evaluation. First of all, my opponent's at +3, and then we have this material imbalance with I have a queen, and they have these three pieces, and they have an extra pawn. Usually, three pieces like this are better than a queen. There is potential for me to get a fork, and this king, like, it's not going to be in any danger of getting forked, but there is this checkmate threat here, so my opponent just has to keep watching about that. But yeah, I mean, black is just super winning here for all, like literally, like king safety. This king is like the least safe it could get. Um, Piece activity. These three pieces are so active. This queen, I mean, it's pretty active, but it's on the edge of the board. Doesn't really have any. It's not really contributing anything. Material. My opponent's up. I mean, this is just about as winning for black as you can get. Let's look at the next example. And in this example, white is slightly ahead at plus 1.1, and I wouldn't call this like winning at the lower level. Because a lot of like this would be like winning for a grandmaster. A grandmaster would convert this, but at a lower level, like there's just not as much of a knowledge of like middle game positions and how to convert like slight advantages like this. So I would just say like white is slightly ahead. This is like a lower level example, but I'm gonna make a video on middle games and stuff like that at some point. I just need to gather my thoughts together. But the reason why white is slightly ahead is because black's piece activity is basically non-existent. This knight can't go here, 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 or here without getting taken. The queen doesn't have very many good squares. The bishop just can't go anywhere, and these rooks are doing nothing. So that's why white is slightly ahead here. And you know, if given time, black can open up their position. And in fact, that's what the computer wanted on this move here in this example, because I just took this from the game review. Is black wanted to try and create some space that they can use to increase their activity. Okay, and now we have this example, and here white is very ahead for a lot of the reasons we've discussed. We like both kings are pretty open, but the black king is way more open than the white king. This pawn is very weak. This bishop has some decent scope, but but it also like needs to defend the king. This knight, who knows where it's going? This pawn is super weak. It's only defended by the knight, and it's also like really pushed far into enemy territory, so it's easier for white to build up pieces and attack. This rook's doing nothing. This rook is just blocked by the bishop and the pawn kind of fortress right here. So in order for like space to get opened up, the rook would have to sacrifice itself, and then white would have weak double pawns, and this rook could come in, but um, you know, you obviously are giving up material there. And white's at +1. So that's why white is very ahead here in this game. Now we have another game. In this one, white is, by the engine, +2. And that's what the material is as well. However, this is a really tricky position. And with human players, I feel like it's really sharp, and the position can change at any second, especially if, as the computer suggests, this rook moves over here. This bishop can come in once the rook is covering it and create some issues. This knight is really strong, really active. So this is, and uh, white's got some, like, white doesn't have as good activity, I would say. Now white can play something like pawn here, and then the knight has to move away, and like try to like break out this way. And that's why the computer's not afraid of this attack, and that's why it says +2. But you also, like, I think I should make another video on. I'm just getting all these video ideas. Like, you know, when to be scared of your opponent's attack and when not to be scared. But yeah, it's a pretty tricky position. But I like, if white can survive this and white can like steady improvements to the position, like getting this knight a little more active, then white will be at an advantage because of the +2 material. White is up in exchange, and white will be more winning. Okay, and now we have an even game. This is a dead heat, basically. This is point 0.2, but I think if you let the engines think longer, it'll be 0, 0-0. Right here, neither side really has, it's black to move. Neither side really has a plan of attack. This pawn is protected. These pawns are weak and they're doubled, but it's really hard for black to actually attack them because in order to do so, black would have to push this pawn up, which then undoubles the pawn. Both kings are pretty safe. If a lot of the pawns get traded off, it could be a different story. But right now, it's super even. No side has like any good way of making progress. Okay, so now I have for you a quiz. I'm going to show you positions from games on chess.com, and you have to decide, okay, is on a scale from black is super winning, black is slightly ahead, it's pretty even, white is slightly ahead, or white is winning. Okay, so just look at the positions. Feel free to pause if you want and try to come up with an evaluation. So here's the first position. It is black to move. And I'm going to give a couple seconds, but I don't know the appropriate like pauses video time. But yeah, here we go. So black is very much winning in this position. Material is equal. That's the first thing I look at because it's the easiest thing to look at. But the king safety and piece activity are what makes white's position a little tough. Also, you have two isolated pawns that are really weak. The You have a bishop pair versus knight and a bishop. Bishop pair is just better there. This knight is pretty active, but it doesn't really have any good squares to go to because all of its squares are covered. And I mean, this rook, like, it's blocked by this bishop right now, whereas black has this really strong rook on the e-file. This bishop's also really strong. It can go here and put some pressure. It can go here and put some pressure. You have this bishop which can go here and like threaten an opera mate. There's a lot of potential that black has in this position and a lot of weaknesses that white has. Okay, let's move on. We have this position. Okay, in this position, black is very, very ahead. This is like -3 on the eval bar. Material again is equal, but it's black's moves. Maybe I should have said that before, but you can kind of see the last move here with the game review. That's why I left it there, so you can see the last move that was played, so you can figure out whose turn it is. Black has a move here that makes black's position a million times better, and it's taking this knight with the bishop. At least this is what I think. I didn't actually like check this in the analysis, but after bishop takes, then pawn takes, white has a tripled pawn. The king is wide open on the g-file. This bishop has no good squares to go to. There's isolated pawn here, will be tripled isolated pawn here. Good active square for the rook. This pawn structure is really solid. This knight is pretty active right now and can go to a lot of different places, and white doesn't have good coverage on them. And then once this rook moves, this rook will be active. So yeah, black is very winning here because of long-term weaknesses in the white position. Let's go to the next position. We have this position. This is a bit of a crazy position. Okay, this position is a dead heat or slightly ahead for black. I can't remember the exact evaluation, but it was like -0.7 or something. It's a really, really sharp position. And part of sharp positions is I feel like the sharper the position, the more equal it is, just by the nature of like the human element of it, right? The engine will say like -4 or something like that. But if there's only one good move and it's hard to find, then like should we really like always trust the engine? Like that's one thing about the engine that one complaint that I have about it. But like If one there's one good move that wins the game and 99 moves that lose the game, like yeah, you're technically winning in that position, but it's hard. Uh, and that is kind of this example. I think with perfect play, um, Black can convert this. Black is at +1, but it is very tricky. And I think with perfect play, White holds. I'm not entirely sure, but we have this pawn. This pawn is really dangerous, and it's a passed pawn, and it's pretty well protected with the queen and the bishop. We have the back rank of White. Could be a possible checkmate if these two rooks move. You have this White queen, which it's protecting this pawn. It's attacking this pawn, but that pawn's defended, and this pawn, like, this is just a long-term weakness, so Black doesn't need to win it right away. This bishop is pretty active, targeting this, but again, the queen's defending. So the queen is a little overloaded right here, but that's more of a tactical thing and not about like which side is winning. So this is a pretty even game, and part of the reason it's super even is just how sharp it is, because this pass pawn could be pretty dangerous down the line. Bishop pair is always going to be pretty good, especially in coordination with the pass pawn. Got the rook on the open file. You got the queen protecting the pawn behind it. So let's look at the next position. Okay. This position on the eval bar is +1 for White. However, as White to move, I would consider this a pretty even position, especially at like a lower level. I think the computer sees the king being a little weak. It sees this square right now is pretty weak. This pawn is pretty weak. Um, and this pawn, like you'd be like, oh, I want to push this up, right? But after like some captures, like it's just gonna get liquidated anyway. So and then also if you push the pawn up, you leave a hole right here that like maybe the knight could use eventually. Like push the pawn up, knight goes here, and now it can jump into that square and have really good activity. So yeah, computer said this is +1. It is pretty even, but Black has these more long-term weaknesses like weak pawn, weak square, weak pawn, knight on the edge of the board doing absolutely nothing. In fact, it has 0 squares. I didn't even see that originally. It has 0 squares. Can't go here because the pawn, can't go here because the pawn, and the queen and pawns cover these two. So uh, Black has like some weaknesses. They're gonna have to spend some time like freeing up their knight and fixing the weaknesses, and that initiative might give White that slight edge. Okay, now we have this position. In this position, it is on the eval bar like -3. Black is very much winning, and it's mostly because of this attack that is brewing on the white position. The king looks pretty safe, but that is just an illusion. This pawn can push up, and it's supported by the bishop, which is directly in line with the king. The queen also is, I mean, the rook is x-raying it, but it's in a really good position to end up to attack. This bishop's also in a good position once this pawn moves. This rook can go here and be active and threaten the queen. And this knight, it's got some decent squares, but it's not like super active. Uh, this rook's not doing anything. This rook basically has to babysit this pawn, so it's not going to be doing anything. Um, and then the queen, like if Black plays something like rook here, the queen doesn't have very many good squares where it could be active. Like it could go here and maybe like use this diagonal, or go here and use this diagonal, but um, White is behind on initiative. There's an attack brewing, and that is why Black is winning. Let's go to the next position. This is a pretty tricky position. So I remember this game. The result of this game was a draw. And right now the computer would also give it a draw. The reason that it is a equal position. Is even though knight bishop I feel like is better than two knights, there's so much pawns on the board, it really makes this bishop hard to maneuver around and put in a good position. And there's really not a good way for either side to make progress. Because, if white tries to break like here, black doesn't even have to take, right? Black can just like wait for white to take and then capture back and undouble the pawns this way. And these doubled pawns, I mean, they're weak, but there's no way for black to make progress. So there's just not a lot of good spaces for either player to use. I mean, like you can be like, okay, knight goes here, and then it goes here, and now, oh, like that's really active. It's really active, but by itself, it's not gonna destroy the castle. So, um, and then like the bishop would just move out of the way. So it's just really hard for either side to make progress, and that's why this game is even. All right, let's check out this position. In this position, white is winning, and it is because of I don't know if this is the official term. I don't think it is. Just a lot of dynamic potential that white has that black doesn't have. So first of all, white is setting these two pawns forward to attack the king. He's got the rook backing it up. He's got this rook who could come over or support the queen here on this file. Has the knight which can hop over here and just be really active, like create a lot of problems for black. This bishop is well protected here, and there's really no good way for black to actually get through, despite everything. Yeah, I mean, knight here, queen here, like this square could get potentially dangerous, but with the knight blocking, and there's really no good way to dislodge this knight, like that queen's not getting through. There's not good squares for this knight. Uh, like, black's pretty much only hope might be bringing the rook and trying to break in the center and create some space. But white has an attack brewing, and black does not have an attack brewing, basically. And that's why. And also, white has potential to really improve their pieces, and black just doesn't. I mean, this knight's on a good square, but like it really has zero threats, and it also has zero ways to improve itself because wherever it goes, it can just get taken. And this knight, same thing. I mean, and um, this pawn is like hanging right now, but it could be defended, or white could just literally ignore it and like play queen over here or something like that. And like yeah, the pawn's weak, but it's pretty easy for white to ignore the threat or deal with it because of like all of these active pieces that can be easily improved. So and also that knight can just be eliminated by this bishop. But that does open up the position for black a little bit. But then again, black doesn't really have a lot of threats even after that. So let's look at the final position. This is from the same game. Who is winning now? This is draw to slightly, or even, I guess. Draw is not the right term. This is not an end game. But even to slightly ahead for black. White no longer has an attack. This bishop isn't really doing anything because it's kind of locked in by the pawns. But if black can get a pawn breakthrough, then the bishop will come alive. If this pawn can move, so this pawn can move, if that makes any sense. Um, this bishop, like, it's on a good square and it's playing defense, but that's all it's doing. This knight, it's really good square, which is here, is covered by this knight. This rook is countered by this rook and the queen over here. This rook is no longer making any progress because it's blocked by its own pawn. The queen can't really get in to attack the king. Everything is protected. But on the same side, like, black really doesn't have a good plane of attack here. White, like, has a lot of, like, spotty weaknesses, such as, like, this isolated pawn. This pawn is protected right now, but it could be weak. The king is more open, but it's just really hard for black to take advantage because black doesn't have enough active pieces around the king or making threats on the white position in order to actually capitalize. So, yeah, that is the end of the video. So I hope you learned something. I hope you um, participated in the quiz. And if you have any disagreements with me, please let me know in the comments because I could be wrong about my evaluation of the position because I'm not actually that good at chess. But kind of want I kind of want to get the gears turning and help like more intermediate players like kind of 800 to 1000 levels start thinking about this, because I think that's the level you stop like blundering pieces and you get more like middle games kind of mean more. I feel like, yeah, and also it can help your chess knowledge in general. But this is a 26-minute video, so I am going to sign off.